Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining. Welcome to our FP&A for Qlik webinar today, featuring Fiplana. This session is part of a sort of series that we're doing, so two 40-minute sessions around FP&A capabilities within Qlik and Power BI. Today's session's all focused around Qlik and enabling FP&A within your Qlik environment. We'll explore how Fiplana brings structured planning, budgeting, and forecasting capabilities inside your Qlik Sense environment, which simplifies FP&A processes and also enables sort of faster decision making without waiting for time for people to go away, make changes, reload apps, etc. So I'll just introduce who I'm joined by today. So I'm Alex Booth, I'm the Business Development Manager at Climber. Hopefully some of you on here today already know who I am, we've met and we've spoke. For those who don't, nice to meet you all. I'm joined by Meredith Dix, who's the Technical Solution Engineer from Insightsoftware. Together we'll run through how Fiplana transforms Qlik into a sort of full FP&A platform. So it's a 40-minute session. We'll run through a demonstration of how Fiplana enables write-back, commentaries, scenario planning, and process automation. That'll all be led by Meredith. Then we'll open up for some questions at the end. Please do feel free to use the Q&A panel throughout the session. I'll keep an eye on that and monitor it, and we'll interject where possible. But then there will be a little bit of time, hopefully at the end, depending on how we get on, to go through those questions. So I'll just go through sort of before we jump into the demo, just a bit about Climber. So these are the 5 pillars that we operate within. Strategic advisory is sort of understanding the investments that you've made into your sort of architecture and systems. Solution development is around sort of actually building out the solutions once we've done those initial discoveries. User training, I'll cover a little bit of that at the end as well, but we have what we call the Climber Academy, where we offer training services on both Qlik and Power BI. Infrastructure services is where we can host and manage customer environments in terms of upgrades, patches, and everything else. And then we also have our dedicated support desk, which is the expert services team, which is a fully managed SLA-driven support desk capability. So that's also available to our customers. Now, around FP&A, these are just some of the sort of reasons that customers want to talk to us around FP&A. I'll not sort of read them all verbatim, but most of the stuff that we tend to hear is around data collection and consolidation issues, lack of real-time collaboration, like I mentioned earlier, waiting for apps to reload, put in a request, change some data in a data set, and then reload apps. Manual processing and version control issues. So are you working off the right version of your budget? Is your forecast up to date? Is it pulling the data from the right places? All those kind of problems. Aligning planning with actual performance, so making sure that it is up to date and it's monitored. And then also limited ability to perform what if scenarios in terms of forecast changes and things like that due to market changes or whatever it may be that drives those what if scenarios in your business. And then what does it actually enable? So a lot of the things that customers are able to do once they've implemented Fiplana, it gives you capability right back directly into the dashboard. So Meredith will cover that in the demo today. Perform forecasting, budgeting, and scenario planning with ease. Replace manual spreadsheets, so taking away the reliance on Excel and SharePoint and all of that kind of environment and bringing it all within one governed space. Empowering business users with an interface that they're familiar with without the need of like additional training or need for IT interference. And then also being able to align your business plans with the real-time data and be able to make those decisions much faster. So obviously everything is right as it should be. So I think that's all from me for the moment. I mean, there's no questions yet, which is great. So I'll hand over to you, Meredith, if you could kick off, please.
Sure, not a problem. Thanks very much, Alex. So I'll go ahead and share my browser. So Fiplana, as we've mentioned, we are inside the context of Qlik. So I'm sitting inside of Qlik Sense. It can be on-premise or cloud version. In this case, I'm using an on-premise server. and I've opened up my Fiplana application. I'm going to be playing a number of roles as we go through this, so I'll have to call out different functionality and point out that it's for different personas. But essentially what we have is coming in here as a cost center owner. I'm able to see that we're currently working on a best case scenario. So our business goes through a process where we load our actuals from our ERP system. So every month we'll be getting actuals coming in. So however often we reload that. But then we do, let's say, 2 budget cycles through the year. So a half-year budget, end-of-year budget. And then we do forecasting. So it might be quarterly forecasting. And the budget we compare to our actuals, and then our forecasts we might want to compare to our budget. We've budgeted for certain things. Is our forecast tracking along with our budget? So there are a number of things that I'm looking at here. There are a number of cycles that we go through in a financial year. And where we are at the moment is we're working on a budget cycle. The one I'm working on is called Best Case, and I can see that inside of my cost center, I have 67% of my submissions are still open. I have a number that have been submitted and a number that have been approved. So there's a bit of workflow here. So I'm looking for people to submit their numbers to me. We can then agree on those numbers, consolidate the agreed numbers, and then submit those forward to go into the corporate budget. So because we're using Qlik, the things that you know and love about Qlik are still there. So I'm actually using a couple of bits from VizLib here to do the graphics, but yeah, it's standard Qlik dashboard, standard Qlik capability. So for example, I'm able to do a comparison here of my different sales plans. Part of the application I have here is sales planning. We'll talk about how we've arrived at these different models in a few moments. But we can see, I've got my, my different sales plans that I've built, so I can compare and contrast those. How do they compare on my total sales, my net income, for example? I could do scenario on scenario planning. So again, let's pick a budget or let's pick a different version, so I'm not comparing the same two together. And you can see, the figures there. So the point I'm trying to make here is it is very much your standard BI platform. So we are leveraging your existing skills in Qlik. We use the Qlik security model for determining who's able to do what inside of this. And it means that we're able to do our planning and budgeting inside of that same environment that my users are using already. So I've got Qlik users. They're familiar with this. They're familiar with the look and feel, the layout, how they interact. So I'm now going to give them that write back capability in this exact same experience. So they're not dipping out into other areas. So that's just a little bit about some of the dashboarding that I've got here, and the point to make is it is Qlik. So looking at my planning and budgeting that I'm going to be doing here, I've got my 2 versions, and I can flip between them and see the key figures for those. But the thing I want to call out is on the left-hand side here, I've got a P&L report, and it looks and feels like a P&L. So I've got my total sales, I've got some operating expenses in here, and then I've got some operating expenses that are called out from the rest, namely my personnel costs. So the idea that my business has is ultimately we're going to be doing our budgeting on a P&L. So we've got a P&L here, and I've broken it into 3 key sections, which then correspond to the 3 budget models that we're basically going to be working with. So sales planning, cost planning, and personnel planning relating to the sections of my P&L. And as we build this up, we'll be able to see and compare and contrast on a P&L how these relate to one another, how they compare to one another. So again, a little bit of dashboarding, a little bit of visualization, but just trying to set the stage a little bit for how we're doing our budgets and why we've chosen to go down the path of the things that you see on the left-hand side here. So I think we're in a good place to start talking about the write back, unless you've got anything you want to add, Alex, or any questions at this stage. I can't see the questions, so if you just keep an eye on that for me, that'd be great.
Will do. Yeah, there's no questions currently, but you just sort of was talking there about sort of different versions of budgets, etc. How does
Yep.
sort of Fiplana handle version control, so you know that you are all sort of singing off the same hymn sheet, and you know you're looking at the most up-to-date version of your forecasts or budgets?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things to point out there is I'm working in the context of a cost center here. We're working on our best case, which we're going to submit to the business. And we may want to build multiple versions within that. So I might have people submitting figures to me. I then look at them and say, well, actually, I think we need to change that. We need to revisit this. So there's almost a workflow inside of the cycle at a cost center level. And then when we approve things, we can then submit them forward. Now, there is workflow built into here, and we'll see that later on in the session. I'll talk about that. That comes down here in the talking about the admin side. But yeah, to your point, inside of Qlik, we can get Qlik to open up with default views, for example. So your users are opening up. I opened up mine, and for my user, I was looking at best case because that's the latest version that we were working on. So I'm seeing the latest figures that everybody had submitted. But the individual users additionally can then be driven to open up the latest version that they've been working on. Now, inside of Fiplana, we can create new versions. We can create new budgets, new forecasts. So this is something which probably won't be enabled for every user. I may be able to do it at a cost center level, create a new budget. The reality is oftentimes this will be done centrally. So centrally we can say, okay, we've actually decided, we're going to open up another budget cycle, click on the button, and we can then give our budget a name, choose which year we're going to use as the basis for it. So I could use my 2025 actuals to budget for 2026 and say, as a start point, just a nice high level, let's start everything off at a 10% uplift. And that would then go and create that new version of the budget with that uplift. Now, obviously, that number that we're putting in there, it's a kind of one-shot, very high-level strategic. This is where we want to be. Now, how do we actually achieve what we're saying here? Similarly, you can also go in and add years. So I can say, okay, I want to I'm now going to be doing a budget, but it's actually for 2 years. So I could say, okay, let's do 2025 and 2027. 2026 and 2027 using my latest actuals, 2025 in this case, and do uplifts on those. So versioning, they're going to be multiple versions that we work with in here. It's managed inside of the model. You always are aware of what version you're in. So I can see here my sales planning, I'm in my best case 2025. So what Fiplana is bringing to this is this write back table that we have at the bottom. So this is an extension that we have. So for folks who are familiar with Qlik development and using extensions, this is an extension. What we have on the left-hand side is a hierarchy that I'm going to do my planning on. So at the high level, what we're rolling up to is a sales figure. So the business has set what they would like to achieve for sales. we in turn have then decided, well, actually, we've got 4 regions that we sell in, so we might want to be able to see this at a regional level. I have sales reps within my regions. My sales reps have a number of customers. So I'm going through here and closing these all manually. I can also do it from the toolbar up there. But we can see I've got a sales rep, Muller, who has a number of customers. And if we open this up, we can see that actually we plan on 2 key accounts for those customers. We're planning what we're going to be doing in terms of sales with them and services, and that then rolls up to our sales figure. Now, what my user is able to do based on the security that they have. So I'm now looking at the sales org in its entirety. I could come in here and say, well, actually, April, I think we should be able to do 1.5 million there. Now, what you can see is I've actually put a figure in at the top level. It's then broken that down into my east, west, north, south. And you can see that by the little orange disclosure arrow that we see over here. So it's showing me that it's impacted all of my regions. Additionally, it would have impacted my sales reps all the way down to individual customers. So if I want to hit 1.5 million, maintain the status quo, then this is how I'm going to need to achieve it. Equally, I could come in at any level and say, well, actually, Muller, I think, is going to do 200,000, and I can then have that allocate back up. Now, the other thing I can do is I can also lock cells. So if I wanted to maintain that 1.5 million, so I've put in 200,000 there for Muller, and what it's done is said, well, okay, if Muller does 200,000, well, then you're going to do 238,000 for the east, and we're going to do 1.48 million for the region. But if I look at these little circles that we have here, I can basically go in and lock cells, unlock cells to include or exclude them from the planning that I'm doing. So, for example, if I thought priority clothing was potentially not going to be a customer beyond April, and I want Muller to do 200, let's do 200,000. It'll then do that allocation, but not take priority clothing into account. It'll allocate those figures across the remaining. So what you're seeing here is the ability to do your planning at any level in this hierarchy. I can do it at the top level, I can do it at the lowest level, but I can also do it at any level in between those. Similarly, if I come all the way over to the right, we have totals here. I could enter a figure into the total and have that break back across the months, or I could put figures in a total here and have that break back as well.
Just on that point, just to interject quickly, sorry. Could you give access to different rows for different people? So if I wanted to go in and only be able to change east, but I couldn't change anything else, could you lock those others so I can only change east? Would that be something that's...
Yeah, absolutely. So the important point here is that we are leveraging the Qlik capabilities as much as possible. So what you end up with is if your security model says that a user only has access to particular intersections of data, so a particular region, particular months maybe, that will be respected by Fiplana. So again, leveraging those Qlik skills as much as possible. The other thing that we're able to do is put in comments if you want to. So very much like an Excel type experience. We had the little arrows showing me that numbers had been changed and what the impact was, but I can also click on this little speech bubble over here and actually enter comments in to my cells. So if I need to give justification for why I believe we're going to be doing a particular figure for a particular person, I can do that inside of here, and then much like the Excel type experience, you get the little arrow up there showing that a comment has been entered against that. Now, something else that's very useful here is obviously we've got our dashboarding, we've got our visualizations, we're doing our write back directly in the same interface. But looking at this, I might need to onboard a new customer. I'm expecting a new customer to come on board. So for my planning purposes, I could go and do it at, let's say, an ERP level or a CRM level and wait for that to filter down through the process, so that ultimately it ends up in my list of customers here. For that, I need to go to somebody and say, hey, could you go and add this customer? Okay, what's the customer name? What's their DUNS number and all the rest of it? Well, I don't know at the moment. We're not sure they're going to be a customer. We're speculating, or it's not so much a particular customer, but we know we're going to have to recruit new customers in this region to be able to do our numbers. So I can actually enter in that detail at this level here. Now we could have this being written back to a staging database maybe for inclusion into those backend systems, or we just keep it local to the system that we're running at the moment. So I'll keep it local to my planning system. So what I'm going to do is say, okay, it's Olsen who's going to be getting this new customer. I need to specify where it's going to fit into that hierarchy. And it's my prospective customer. I think I'm going to do 500,000 in sales with them, and 75,000 in, well, 75,000 in services. So I've put in what I think I'm going to do for the year. So I want those numbers to be added in, and we'll see those numbers then get added to Olsen's figures. I also have a number of distribution models that have been created. So these have been created by the business. It's not something that is fixed inside of Fiplana. I can see different ways that I want to distribute it. So what this is saying is that 575,000, how would you like to distribute that over the year? So I can see a number of scenarios here. I've got some descriptions. I can come in and pick one of those and then go and write that back. So we've got Olsen here. They've got 5 customers and 796,000 in sales there. They now have 6 customers and a target of 1.37 million. So we can then go back to our planning. I've still got Olsen selected here, so of course standard Qlik functionality. By making any selection, it actually keeps that filter there. So I can now go in here. Let's close all of my levels here, and I can then see my prospective customer with 575,000 added to my best case, and then the distribution of that. And if we go down a level there, I can see how my product sales and my services have been allocated based on that.
Just a quick interjection there, Meredith. That's why I've had a question
Yeah.
come in. So obviously when you're making changes in that table, you're hitting the tick to write back those changes. Somebody's just asked, where is the data from all of these write-backs actually stored? Is it landing in a QVD or somewhere else? And I think the answer is probably, if I remember correctly, multiple options you can write back to.
Yeah, absolutely. So we support a number of databases, including things like your snowflakes and a number of the more traditional type of databases. So the reality is you land the data where you want to. What I've seen happen with implementations is people writing this data back to Qlik. And the reason why I say that is if we have a planning system, or our ERP system then takes the planning data in, bearing in mind I'm operating within a cost center here and I've got people making changes to the data. Do we want to submit that back to the system of record every time? And do we want every version that they're working on written back? Oftentimes, no. This is a bit like Excel. It's a scratch pad that I'm working with here. I'm thinking, what about this? What about this? I don't want that written back. I'm going to submit it. It'll then go through an approval process, and then somebody says, yep, okay, I'm happy with those figures. At that point, you might then turn around and say, okay, now we need to write this back to the system of record. Or maybe it's when we've consolidated all the figures up, we say, okay, this is our half-year budget. Now let's go and push that back to a back-end system. So you're absolutely right, Alex. The answer is multiple destinations. And from a workflow point of view, that's often how we get it working, is to actually, look at the business process and try and map that into what we've got here.
Yeah, and kind of to the point you mentioned earlier about versions, you'd have, like you say, a number of those different versions maybe in QVDs, but then when you've got your best and final, that's when you then submit it and write it back to your source system or wherever it may be, that would then be its final destination, I guess.
Yep, correct.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And you mentioned the Excel word there a few times. Obviously, one thing we find when speaking to customers around FP&A, it's a lot of the time this is done in Excel, it's done in SharePoint folders, and everyone has access to locked rows and formulas and everything in Excel. How easy is it for finance users to transition from an Excel-based SharePoint solution into a Qlik app FP&A solution?
Sure. Yeah. So yeah, at this point, I was going to mention forecasts pretty quickly, but I'll jump out of it because I think there's a better place to answer your immediate question. Just on the forecast note, questions do often arise about doing things like rolling forecasts. So we do have that capability as well. So I can say, okay, as my actuals come in, my forecast window is going to move out. So I can say, okay, I'm now using my actuals up to June because we've just closed our books for June. And then July to December, we're going to use our best case scenario as our figures going forward. So we can actually build out a rolling forecast using this. But to your point about Excel, one of the best places to show that potentially is with the personnel planning. Now, what we have is, if I come into my costs and overheads here, centrally what we've done is we can go in and specify basically what the costs are going to be for our for our users. So if we go in here, I need to pick plan that we're working on, all the rest of it. Salesperson Olson, we actually want to look at the overall figures now, so we'll get rid of that. Let's get rid of a couple of my different scenarios here. So there we go. So what I've got is we've set up a table showing what our costs per full-time employee are, and if we're doing any variable compensation planning in here as well, we can use that. So we're actually going to use these as drivers now for our employee planning. So this could be done at a cost center level. Again, it could be done centrally, but my user is going to leverage those to do their planning for HR. And what we see on the table here is exactly the same extension as we had for the sales planning, but whereas that was more freeform and it was doing those allocations top down and left and right, we now have a structure where I am able to enter in, for example, a number of full-time employees, and it says, okay, based on the cost being 20,000, your budget's going to be 60,000. Or I can come in here and say, I've got a budget of 12,000 there. Well, in that case, you have the ability to hire 2.4 full-time employees. So what we can see here is a very simple formula. So the table that I'm using is the same extension as we had for the sales planning. I've got the same capability with the expanding and collapsing, the holding out of data. But I'm able to enter a number into either my full-time employees or my total costs, and it'll then calculate. It's a very simple formula that we're using here. We've done that deliberately just to illustrate what's going on. If this was Excel and I was going in and typing numbers in here, these cells would be, it work in one direction, not the other, because I'd probably have a formula in one of them. So it would either be saying, okay, take this column, multiply by that column to give me my total costs, or tell me your total costs and let me work out the full-time employees. What we're doing here is we're actually entering the figures in either way, and we're not overwriting formulas. I'm not breaking this. I don't end up with an Excel spreadsheet that then ends up in a broken state, either that I can visibly see, or unwittingly I then submit it and somebody else tries to combine it with another spreadsheet, another spreadsheet, another spreadsheet, and then we end up with in a case where things are broken and we've got to go and try and unpick where it actually occurred. So to your point, Excel, it is very similar to Excel. You can copy and paste data from Excel into your tables. So if people really want to be using Excel, they can do that and then say, okay, right, I've now done my scratch pad in Excel. I'll now take those figures and put them into my table. The reality is we're hoping that people will use Excel less and less. So we are giving an experience which we've tried to make very much like a pivot table inside of Excel. Give them the flexibility of where they want to enter figures, and the Qlik developer is able to build out these tables where you could have columns which are scratch pads for things. So have columns off to the right here where people could do different things and either have that being reflected in the table here, or they could then move the values across. So we are trying to make it like an Excel experience, give them the confidence and the comfort that Excel brings, but do it in a managed and governed way. So we don't end up in those broken states, and we don't end up in a situation where after the fact, we're then going through the dashboards, we're comparing scenarios and saying, okay, where did that figure come from? I'm not quite sure how we got there. I need to dig back into it and unpick the data lineage. And when Excel's part of your data lineage, unpicking it becomes extremely difficult, if not impossible. So yeah, we're trying to keep people inside of the Qlik environment, and give them something that they can work with that is familiar to them. Now, it's probably a good point to talk a little bit about the workflow, the administration of this, because that is quite a big part of any financial cycle. So if I come in here and look at my workflow, having built out my figures, I then need to basically submit them. Now what we've done here is, just to show what's going on, I actually have my users listed in here. We're using single sign-on for Qlik, and that's being consumed by Fiplana. So we need a way of basically simulating multiple users and multiple capabilities. So that's what I've got here. So it's a little bit of a stretch of the imagination. You wouldn't typically have this in an implementation. You'd typically have a table down here where you could do allocations for people. So for my user, you could see I could do sales planning, cost planning, personnel planning. That's why those sheets were available to me. It's why I can see them on the left-hand side here. Can I confirm the data? So can I submit it? Can I approve those figures? So we've got a little table here doing our workflow, or managing our workflow. But something worth pointing out is generally you'd have this tied to single sign-on, and that's in fact what we have here. So this is actually picking this up off my single sign-on login, but then I'm needing to be able to simulate changing roles a little bit.
And I guess for those that are using the QMC, sorry to just jump in, it's very similar when you're applying different roles and spaces and things like that in the QMC. So when you're giving someone, data access or write access or whatever it may be, it's a very similar setup. So
absolutely, you raise a good point there, and that is, with security, there are two levels that you're looking at. There's authenticating the user, who are you? And then there's authorizations. What are you allowed to do? Now, most of that we're able to consume from Qlik. Who are you? Authenticate the user. And what are you allowed to do inside of Qlik? Well, they have security models for that. We've just had to supplement it a little bit by saying, okay, write back, planning. There's a little bit of extra that we need to add on top of that, because there isn't the concept of the approver and the system admin and things like that for my Fiplana app. So there's just a little thin layer of security we've added to that for authorizations. Yeah. So in my case, I'm an approver or a confirmer and an approver. So that's why I can see both of these tables. And the idea is, my user would go through and say, okay, I'm happy now with those figures that we've put in, to basically submit them for approval. We could do things like ratings on there, or I could have a notes column here where the user could type in some notes to explain it. So we had the commentary on the cells. I can also put notes in here, and then my approver will be given a summary of effectively what has been done. So I'd go in and say, okay, I'm happy to approve that now. It'll then move to the approval state. So we see the data will then come down into this bottom table where an approver would be able to look at. So it's disappeared off my top table there, and it's come in here, and my user could then, again, say what they think of the numbers, and whether or not they're happy to then submit it forward to the next step in the process. And it's at this point that it then starts being incorporated into our submission pack, and would then start at a central level, start filtering into the dashboards and visualizations that those users have. So that's effectively sort of closing the loop in terms of what we have with this. So a little bit of workflow behind the scenes. Just conscious of time, Alex. Do we have any other questions come in? I know you had some questions as well. So yeah.
There's none in the Q&A at the moment now, so we've covered all of the ones throughout the session, so that's good. I mean, the only other sort of question that we get from customers is sort of, oh, we have got a question actually.
Okay, great.
What does it cost? Well, I mean, we can get into that, I suppose, in a separate conversation, but it's, if I remember correctly, it's per user base. Is that right, Meredith?
Yes.
Yeah. So we look at the number of users, and then obviously it's an annual subscription for the use of the extensions and the platform and everything else. So yeah,
correct,
perfect. And I suppose the final one, I mean, quite a good segue, I suppose, from the cost is, how easy is it for customers to sort of get an ROI or see some sort of return on investment of going from, well, Excel works and we're using SharePoint, to actually implementing a proper FP&A platform within Qlik?
Yeah, great question. So working in finance scenarios, I often see three kind of axes for value. I like photography, so if you're taking photos, you have an exposure, and you have your shutter speed, your aperture, and your sensitivity, your ISO of your film. And if I reduce the shutter speed, then it's going to be open for longer, so I can have a smaller aperture. Any lever I pull is going to have a knock-on effect for the others, and that's really what we see here. So the three axes with this generally are time and cost, standard, and risk. We are risk averse, and we're wanting governance. So that's a big lever with these solutions, is moving away from that Excel type of environment, the ungoverned environment, to something which is more structured, but is done in an environment that the users are comfortable with, they are familiar with. It's also about leveraging existing Qlik skills. So the way that I build these applications is using standard Qlik capabilities and standard Qlik skills. So there's a time and a cost element to that, and also risk, because if the person is familiar with Qlik, it's de-risking it compared to giving them solution ABC out there and saying, hey, here's a book on finance, go read that and build something.
And we've had customers as well that have had sort of other off-the-shelf FP&A platforms. You might need a partner to make a change for you. You might have to, put a request in, wait for somebody to go away and maybe bespoke that solution to fit your use case. Whereas, like you say, by doing it within Qlik and retaining the knowledge within the business, you're able to make it look and feel how you want for your users and how you want them to interact with it. So that's certainly something that's come
Absolutely.
up in the past. So
It's a balancing act. Yes, a lot of the FP&A solutions out there are extremely structured and extremely rigid. They have a certain number of dimensions that are absolutely required, and then you end up building like dummy accounts in some ways to get around some of the restrictions of those. And yeah, absolutely, it's a change control process. Oh, we need something added here. Well, for that, we're going to have to go and create these accounts here. There's, you have to put in a request, go through it, because we don't want to go break anything. So there is this balancing act. We are wanting something governed, we are wanting something structured. What we've done here is we've said, okay, let's use Qlik, which is familiar to users, and leverage Qlik capabilities. So we are able to respond to things quicker. The business might decide that in the next budget cycle, they want something completely different. We could see sales planning, we could see personnel planning, same capabilities, but delivered in a different way. The business turns around and says, actually, we'd like to do something completely different now. So it is that balancing act between being flexible, being able to make changes without being gung-ho and the kind of Wild West, versus something extremely structured, extremely rigid, which oftentimes gets in the user's way, and they do end up jumping out into familiar tools. So they'll, if you make it arduous for them, they're going to find a way around it, and that way invariably is Excel on my machine.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. So I think that's probably all we've got time for. I know we've overrun a little bit. I've just got two more slides just to quickly share, just to see us out. So we are exhibiting at the Qlik AI Reality Tour on the 8th of July. So if you are registered for that, great. We'll look forward to seeing you there. If you're not, we'll certainly share the link after this session. For anybody who registers for the AI Reality Tour as well, there is also a voucher for a Qlik certification. So if that's something that you're looking to increase your skills in any of the Qlik platform, there's some new AI courses available. There's some really interesting stuff in the Qlik certification catalog. You do end up getting I think it's X amount of money. I think it's £200, something like that, to pay towards a certification. So well worth registering. And sort of on that kind of segue, I think, into the last slide before I say bye, is we are also running a Qlik Sense end user training course on the 4th of September through our Clamor Academy. It is limited seats and it is trainer led in English. We will also share the link out for that in a follow-up email. Hopefully that's answered all of your questions around Fiplana and the use of sort of bringing that within to Qlik and how you can use it. We will follow up, and if there's any other questions that you've got, please feel free to reach out to either myself or Meredith. And I guess thanks everyone for your time today. And